Look, my opinion is they shouldn't be here. They've been paid a lot of money to go play on a different tour that is trying to buy the professional game in golf. And
Rory Mcilroy has just reshaped the biggest debate in modern golf. After years as one of LIV Golf's strongest critics, he's now delivered a surprising shift in tone that's making players, tours and fans reassess what comes next. His comments don't just reopen the conversation, they raise fresh questions about loyalty, money, and the future structure of the sport. And depending on how the tours respond, this moment could mark the start of a major realignment in professional golf. Here's what changed, and why it matters. Rory Mcilroy, softening his stance on LIV golf. Rory Mcilroy built a reputation as one of the most vocal critics of LIV golf, repeatedly defending the PGA Tour and questioning the long-term direction of the breakaway league. So when he recently signaled a shift in tone, the reaction across the golf world was immediate. This wasn't a headline-grabbing outburst or a sudden emotional reversal. Instead, it appeared to be the product of reflection, changing circumstances, and the evolving reality of a divided sport.
Nope. Sorry.
no, I understand.
Observers point to several contributing factors. LIV is no longer theoretical. It has reshaped the competitive landscape, attracted elite players, and forced negotiations at the highest levels of the game. At the same time, relationships matter. Rory remains close with many players who made the move, and his revised stance may reflect a broader acknowledgement that the situation is more complex than loyalty lines drawn in 2022. McIlroy's comments also align with a wider industry discussion about unification, coexistence, and what is best for the sport long-term. Rather than softening as a sign of defeat, some analysts see it as strategic realism. Golf is changing, and one of its most influential voices appears willing to rethink earlier positions in light of that fact. Could LIV players return to the PGA Tour? One of the biggest questions now being examined is whether there should be a legitimate pathway for LIV golf players to return to the PGA Tour. Rory McIlroy has recently suggested that the door should not stay permanently closed, a notable shift from earlier hardline positions within the golf establishment. His comments reflect a growing recognition that the landscape has changed, commercially and politically, since the initial split.
But it's not LIV. I think that's the thing. I still hate LIV. I hate LIV. I hope it goes away, and I would fully expect that it does.
The idea raises major structural and competitive questions. How would returning players be reintegrated? Would penalties still apply? And what would it mean for players who rejected LIV's financial incentives and remained loyal to the PGA Tour? Supporters argue that unity strengthens the sport and restores elite fields at key events, while critics warn that unrestricted returns could damage trust and fairness. From an investigative standpoint, this debate is less about forgiveness and more about policy. The conversation has clearly moved from theoretical to practical, and McIlroy's willingness to discuss reintegration suggests that total exclusion may no longer be realistic or sustainable for professional golf. How Jon Rahm's move influenced Rory's perspective. Jon Rahm's decision to join LIV Golf was one of the most significant transfers in modern golf, not only because of the financial scale involved, but also because of Rahm's status as a major champion and current global star. His move appears to have forced a recalibration in how players, including Rory McIlroy, interpret the motivations and consequences behind joining LIV.
I think I agree with that statement. Yeah, every time I get asked a question like this, I say the same thing. I think there's room for both. It's as simple as that. And I think we have the opportunity to end up with an even better product for the spectators and the fans of the game. A little bit more variety doesn't really hurt anybody. So I think
Rahm was never openly hostile toward the PGA Tour, and his departure challenged the narrative that LIV defectors were easily categorized. If someone regarded as principled, competitive, and committed to tradition could still choose LIV, then the conversation becomes less moralized and more multifaceted. Players now weigh schedule control, financial security, emerging formats, and long-term opportunity differently. For McIlroy, Rahm's move seems to have underscored an uncomfortable reality. Friends, Ryder Cup teammates, and longtime colleagues now operate in separate ecosystems. Maintaining rigid opposition becomes more complicated when the decision affects people rather than abstractions. Analysts suggest this triggered a more pragmatic assessment of where the sport is heading. Rather than signaling endorsement, Rory's evolving comments may simply reflect recognition that the landscape is now permanently altered. and that collaboration, not polarization, may be the only viable route forward. What a unified, or divided, future could look like. With Rory Mcilroy softening his public tone, attention shifts toward what the future structure of professional golf might realistically look like. Several scenarios now circulate among industry analysts: a formal merger, coexistence with limited integration, or continued separation with periodic negotiation. Each path carries implications for rankings, scheduling, sponsorship, and player mobility.
Now that the two sides have kind of come together and are operating together here?
That's way above my pay grade. I have no idea how the Department of Justice operates.
A unified global tour appeals to many stakeholders who believe fractured competition dilutes interest and undermines historic events. However, unification requires alignment between organizations with different financial models, governance priorities, and long-term strategies, a process far more complex than public statements may suggest. If separation persists, the economic and cultural impact becomes clearer over time. Fans may gravitate toward whichever platform offers stronger fields and storytelling. Players may increasingly behave like independent contractors navigating multiple ecosystems, and the traditional hierarchy of tours could erode. Rory's shift in rhetoric signals recognition that the debate has moved beyond loyalty contests. It now centers on sustainability, financial, competitive, and cultural. The way negotiations progress over the coming seasons may determine whether this period is remembered as a disruptive phase or a lasting realignment. The ongoing debate: cash contracts versus golfing legacy. The financial scale of LIV golf contracts has reshaped one of the oldest debates in professional sport, whether success should be measured by earnings, competitive achievement, or a balance of both. Rory Mcilroy has acknowledged that the sums on offer from LIV are extraordinary, yet he continues to question what players ultimately want their careers to represent. The conversation has moved beyond simple criticism, with growing recognition that financial security, family priorities, and long-term planning all factor into modern career decisions.
That's right. Of course. You know, I said it to Jay yesterday, you've galvanized everyone against something, and that thing that you galvanized everyone against, you've now partnered with. So, yeah, of course I understand it.
Analysts now examine whether LIV's guaranteed money model changes athlete motivation. Traditional tours reward week-to-week performance, making pressure and consistency central to success. LIV reduces that jeopardy, though supporters say it simply modernizes compensation in line with other global sports leagues while reshaping sponsorship visibility and audience reach. For Mcilroy, legacy still matters most. Major championships, historical continuity, and deep competition continue to define greatness. Yet he also accepts that motivations vary, and choosing financial certainty doesn't automatically signal a lack of ambition. How player relationships are evolving through the divide. The shift in Rory Mcilroy's tone also highlights how personal relationships inside professional golf have been tested by the emergence of LIV. What began as a structural dispute has gradually become a matter of daily interaction. Practice rounds, team competitions, and Ryder Cup chemistry all take place in the shadow of competing business models. Early tensions were openly expressed, but over time, players appear to be negotiating a more pragmatic coexistence.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm involved in the decision-making process at all, really, but
Behind the scenes, agents and player managers note that communication remains frequent across tours. Friendships don't disappear simply because competitive environments change. Yet there are unmistakable shifts. Some PGA Tour players feel loyalty should hold financial value, while others believe career choice should not invite judgment. LIV players, meanwhile, balance the benefits of financial stability with the reality of reduced exposure in some traditional events. Mcilroy's more measured language reflects recognition that the human element matters. Divisive commentary risks damaging long-term relationships and team dynamics. With Ryder Cup eligibility, world ranking access, and scheduling still being debated, the tone of dialogue among leading figures increasingly influences how easily compromises might emerge. In effect, the locker room has become a barometer of the sport's direction, not hostile, but adjusting to a new normal, defined by parallel pathways rather than a single professional home. What this moment means for his public image. Rory Mcilroy has long been one of golf's most candid public voices. His willingness to address difficult issues directly earned him respect, but also placed him at the center of every LIV-related debate. Now, as his tone evolves, analysts are assessing how this shift influences perceptions of his leadership, consistency, and long-term role within the sport.
Yes, because a lot of these guys are, in their late 40s or, in Phil's case, early 50s. And yeah, I think everyone in this room, and they would say to you themselves that their best days are behind them.
Some observers view his revised stance as a sign of maturity, an acknowledgement that the industry landscape has changed and that rigid positions no longer serve the game. Others interpret it as a strategic repositioning as negotiations toward tour alignment continue. Either way, McIlroy's comments carry weight well beyond his own career, shaping public understanding of the broader transition within professional golf. Reputation in sport is rarely static. Athletes are evaluated not only by results, but also by how they respond to change, challenge, and contradiction. McIlroy's openness to re-evaluate earlier views suggests a willingness to adapt rather than defend past rhetoric. That approach may ultimately strengthen his standing as a thoughtful, pragmatic leader during a time of structural uncertainty. In the end, his bombshell isn't a dramatic reversal, but rather a signal that the conversation has moved into a more realistic and solution-focused phase. Before you go, remember, Rory Mcilroy's latest comments aren't just another moment in the LIV debate. They reflect a wider shift in how players, tours, and stakeholders are beginning to view the future of professional golf. What happens next, whether cooperation, restructuring, or continued division, will shape how the game is organized, marketed, and experienced by fans. And as one of golf's most influential voices, McIlroy's perspective carries real weight. If you want to follow how this unfolds, from negotiations to player reactions, keep watching closely. The shape of modern golf may be changing, and this moment could be one of the key turning points.